Hi there and welcome to the Gen VFX tutorial. Slightly delayed this week, very sorry about that. Gary here is still, and today we're going to be doing not a one-by-one, not a one-by-one-ish. We're going to be doing a proper speed-through. I like them. I never think of what to call them. We're going to call them a speed-through. And basically it's me modelling a mini hover car using some of the modifiers and tools and stuff that we've talked about so far, and also some other stuff as well, which I'm going to mention as we're going along. But basically, I drew this car. You can probably see it there, just behind that thing there. And when I was thinking about doing the hover car, I had to think in terms of what car bodies were like, how car bodies worked in terms of the way the shells are broken up. So this is what I'm doing right now, is I'm going through and looking at where the cut marks are. I mean, I kind of know, but sometimes in order to be absolutely certain, it's good to look at reference and good to look at things. So that's basically what I've done. I've picked cars that are close, or at least have a similar feel to the sort of car I'm going to be building. As you see, it's that little thing there. And as a consequence, what I then went and did was looked at it over and said, right, okay, well, I want these lines in my car. I can kind of see where I'm going with it. I'm going to properly put them in. So that's what I'm doing now. These essentially are panel cut lines. The red lines are panel cut lines. And then as I was doing those, I thought, well, that's fine. And now I'm looking at some very odd shapes at the front there around the grille. I need to really think about that. I'm not entirely certain that's right. How am I going to go about building that? And then I used a trick which I think a lot of people use, which is to kind of draw some quads, is to give you a bit of a guide. So you've actually got a place where you can know where you can put things. And then also finishing off where the cut lines are. And then also you can see there are also quite distinct highlight points as well in the model. So I decided to put those in as well, because essentially to be able to see that highlight, that's got to be a structural change, a structural edge, i.e., you know, angled upwards rather than angled downwards, so the grey areas are sort of like facing towards the floor and so on. So with that in mind, I then started off and I dragged in my image. I just basically found out where I put it. It took me a while because I couldn't remember, and then dragged it in. And if you drag an image directly in, it creates an empty and basically makes you a reference image. That's perfectly, it's great. It's a really nice quick way of doing it. And I'm now repositioning it so it's a bit further back than the actual place, so it's not in the center of the screen. I'm taking my default cube and I'm using Auto Mirror. Auto Mirror is an add-on which comes in a standard with Blender, and it's just, you just have to go into the preferences and turn it on. And then with a few, basically using Control R, I'm adding edge loops to give me the rough shape of the car. And then straight away, we have to start forming the lines that we drew in the drawing. So there's the ones for the windows. I'm now lifting the ones up for the base of the car, putting another line in there, and that's going to be my first top of my highlight edge. And I'm going to basically pull that around again, and then put another line in, which is for a lower line area, and then there'll be ones there for the glass and so on. And you know, it is a matter very much of just going Control R, drop it in, pull it around, adjust. You can see there I'm thinking one of the lines I put in wasn't in the right place. There's a really very good manipulation tool actually. It's very standard. It's just basically the tool you use for moving things around. But actually it's basically moving an item along an edge. So if you've got a vertex and you want it to keep it on the edge that it's coming on, you want to move it along, but you don't want to move it away from the edge that you've created. If you press G on the keyboard twice, so first to activate G and then once again, that second tapping of G, what that does is it means, right, well, move it, but only in the constraints of that point. I don't want it moved in any other way. So if you're moving something left and right to make it further away from you or closer towards you, that's fine. You can do that just by what I was doing just then, just pushing it across the axis that it's actually on. But if you're working something where you know you've got to adjust it along its axis so it stays on the same plane of the lines, because you want to keep that flow, want to keep that edge flow, that's when using double G is brilliant, because it just allows you to keep everything on the edge loops and so on. So I'm still adjusting here, and now I'm basically putting in the side line for the line that goes between the two doors, and then here I'm adjusting points and points and points. And there's a lot of that, just pushing points forwards and backwards. It's most of the part of modeling is actually putting in a point and then putting it where you actually want it, because it's very rare that a point just goes in exactly the right spot. So there's quite a bit of that here. So while you can see what I'm doing, just pulling things around and getting them into the places where I want them, I'm going to talk very briefly about the loop tools in Blender. Loop tools, again, is another add-on tool. Now, it's got a bunch of commands in there, but basically it is a separate menu of tools which you can bring up on the right-hand side of your viewing pane if you press N on the keyboard to bring up all that side of the control. Is it N on that side or T on that side? Do you know, I always keep on forgetting. I think it's N. I'm going to say it's N. But the button that you press to bring up all the stuff that tells you about the details about the car, the items, the elements that you that you're using when you're in edit mode, which I haven't got open right now. In there, you can actually see any add-ons that you've got turned on, which are essentially usable. Now, what you can do with loop tools is once you turn them on, you've got them there, or you can press the right-hand mouse button. If you've got this set up this way, you can press the right-hand mouse button and it will bring up the menu for you on the screen. So you can see all the things that you can do in edit mode. And then right at the very top, it's got loop tools. And in there's a very specific number of commands. What you have is and this is off the top of my head, so I may miss something, but hopefully I won't. You have a bridge tool. So if you're creating an edge, taking two edges, you can create a bridge between them as long as they're in the same object, obviously. You have got the circle tool, which means whether it's edges, vertices, or faces, you select them. It doesn't matter whether you select 4 or 2 or 9 or whatever, and you will try its absolute bestest to form you a perfect circle with a limited number of points visible in that area. And it's fabulous. It's probably one of my favorite parts of any software. They recently put it into Maya. The add-on, the loop tools, has been in Blender for a very long time. So they're nicking from Blender. Ooh, cheeky beggars. Mind you, that's a good thing. It's good that people see things that are usable in other software and read the white papers and adjust it to make it their own rather than actually steal it outright. So you've got the bridge tool, you've got the circle tool, you've got a lofting tool, you've got one called G-stretch, which I really like. That was just me using proportional editing to pull a lot of points and adjust the shape all at the same time, so you can actually get a nice fall off. So again, you keep that kind of flow. So yes, there's, as I said, did I just say G-stretch? I'm going to say it again. You've got G-stretch, and what that does is it takes whatever the points are that you've got, that you've selected, it forms them into a straight line. Flatten also does something similar to that, where it takes the points and flattens them off. You've then got relax, which takes any of the points you've selected and relaxes them. And what I'm doing there is I'm doing a relax on all of those points along that face. And there you go. Now you can see the menu is up and visible on the right-hand side. So if you look on the right side, you can see the loop tools. It's bridge, circle, curve, flatten, G-stretch, loft, relax, and space. And actually, space is fabulous because what space does is it takes all the points that you've got on a line and then actually spaces them with exactly the same value between each space in terms of the actual arc length on the line, on the actual edge. So if you've done a load of points and they say 10 points and they're all a bit off, but you need to be equidistant, that's what that does, which is great. So, I mean, right now, I mean, that's a pretty basic construct of the shape. You can pretty much see where we're going with this. And that's not bad. And then also you'll notice that because after doing the auto mirror, what I've done now is I want to add some more points, but I don't want to use subdivision. And that is why people who enjoy modeling, who don't like subdivision very much, put a bevel above it. And if you remember, if you have watched it, my modifiers, one of my modifiers, one-on-ones, talking about bevel, is you can use weight as a method for the actual limits. So what you do is you select every single one of your vertices, you set the weight, you put the limit onto weight, you then go up into your tool, you transform in the item, and you can get the bevel weight is visible, and what you do is then increase the bevel weight. So the bevel weight, if it's 0, you don't get any extra lines. When it isn't 0, you increase that and you'll get more points. So where you can see that where there is a pale blue line on the geometry, it's better when you see it in edit view from a side. If you at an angle. If we go back in a second, you should be able to see those. That's me saving it. Those lines are the actual physical weights. That's me looking at this, and I've just baked that whole shape there. Not entirely happy with some of the bits there, but then that's the way it goes. But still, I think that's pretty close to what I want to do. But now you can actually see there. I see there's still some weight problems going on there. And you can see the weight lines there. The blue lines again. There you go. So there you go. I've gone back a stage because I wasn't happy with what it was, and that's an important thing to do. In fact, it's a really, really important thing to do. Is to make sure that when you are building something, because of you have this wonderful non-destructive history, when you want to actually bake the history and go on to the next stage, duplicate your model inside of Blender as it is and turn the original one off. So you've just got this one, and then you can bake that and then try and do what you want to do and see if you can get it right. And if you can't, you can blow it away, and you can still go back to that one that you created already, because it's got all of the history involved in it. It's still stuck in there. So, I mean, the shape here wasn't quite working. There wasn't enough points in certain places. I ended up having to bevel in places where I was not happy beveling. And what you might also see there, if you look around the light, there are other methods for giving a harder edge, particularly if you're using subdivision. You can either add a separate layer, a separate edge very, very close to your other edge, which is you can actually see the bevel tool does. But what you can also do in subdivision, which is it's useful, is that you can edit the weight of a crease. So you can add a crease actually to your subdivision. And I've actually done that in a few instances on here, particularly on the lines that go along the blue lines on the side of the vehicle. I've actually said, right, okay, I need that to be sharper with the subdivision. So I've gone in there and selected a bunch of edges that make up that line, and then go up and gone seam crease. So the value on the bottom there, you can actually see it now below the transform at the very bottom. It's got it there, written there. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with the shell. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the shell. I've got no problems with that. So I've basically, what I've got to think about now is taking that one solid shell and turning it into the panels that we were talking about from the very beginning. So what I'm doing now is I'm going up all of the lines that I have there that basically are the construction lines for each part of the car. And again, there's a little bit of backwards and forwards trying to make sure that I'm picking the right ones, because there is a way to pick a whole line, and that is to press Alt and then click on an edge, and that selects the entire line. But of course, in some instances, I don't want the entire line. I just want part of the line. So you can actually select them all and then deselect. But it is a deselect individual edges, but it's actually a lot simpler to go in there and press Shift on an edge, or pick an edge, and then press Control on the edge that is the end of that line. So you pick on the first edge, and then you say, right, I want it to go as far as this point. So press Control and then click your next point, and that is what you will get. You'll get a line between one point to the next. So you can then keep your finger on Shift and click a different edge, and then go down to Control and click on the next edge that you want. So you can get right angles and lines and so on. I've actually ended up cleaning it up by taking a lot of stuff out, trying to speed up the process. Because the whole point of this was for me to do all of this, by the way. That's what I meant to say. The point was to try and build a whole car in 3 hours. So what I've just done there, you can just see is I've beveled those edges that I picked. I'll hopefully be able to see it again in a second or two, because I do change it and do it again. I select all the edges that I wanted, I'm happy with, and then I go, right, okay, I'm now going to bevel all those edges. So I made it a nice small value, and then I've deleted them. And that's it. I've literally made the panels by deleting the elements that I don't want, which is great. It's still one shell, in essence. I can still do things to it, but it's just the one shape. Now, this next little trick is quite useful. Now, you probably just saw that blow up with the displace. I want to create the inside of the car. So what I've done is I've taken the original car model that I had before I baked it. I've duplicated that. I then stuck on a displace, because that displaces everything along its normals, and then made the displacement value a minus number. So what I'm essentially doing is building a shell to go inside of the car. So right now I'm just deleting from that shell all the windows. I was selecting edges and not realizing. So now I'm going back in here with the lasso tool and just selecting all of the polys that make up the glass areas there and removing the ones that make up the wing mirror patch, so that when we actually come to showing the inside of the car, it's going to cut out the bits where you won't be able to, where you want to be able to see in. So there you go. So I'm deleting faces there, and that's not quite correct. So there was a bit of a faff actually. By the way, excuse the throat. It's a bit sore at the minute. I should have said that from the outset, really. But at the moment, there you go. So now I am looking at the shell that I've got, all the individual elements, which aren't individual elements, they're just one big thing. And I'm just assigning a shader to the inside of the car. And at the same time, I'm also selecting the entire car, and I've put on a solidify, and I've put on a subdivision surface. So I can have a look at how it would look with all those gaps. And the gaps look too big. And the reason for that is, when I built it, there aren't actually enough edges going closer to the actual edges of the geometry. But I didn't want to add them all in with a subdivision, because I would have got far too many edges. And that's the major thing you want to avoid when you're doing anything like this, is having too much geometry. Because when you have too much geometry, it's practically impossible to do anything with anything. So I'm going in here and just adding edges in underneath the subdivision back to the main shape. Just to give it that extra bit of detail towards the sides. It's kind of squaring them off. But if you go and look at a car, if no panels are squared off, they're all curved on the edges. You will not get a sharp edge on a panel. They just don't. There just isn't. So when all these are in place, it'll start to feel a little bit more like a car. And also, the surface which I made dark, which was underneath, which was the other shell, basically, of the car, that will show through between each of the objects, to give it a darker sort of like, this is an interior of the car between these panels. And then also there I made a boo-boo. You probably just noticed. It's a little, I managed to blow away an extra bevel and blow away an extra edge. So I will sort that out in a minute. At least I remember sorting it out. I'm hoping it recorded it. And there you see I'm now getting rid of extraneous bits that I don't actually need. And then I'm adding extra bits in. So I'm basically building a new cut in the surface, which is better. And then I'm going to sort out this little bit here, you see. Put a few more cuts in and then bridge those together. Because remember, that's not a solid object. That is actually a flat tile of polygons. And what I'm doing is extruding, not extruding, well, I suppose so. I'm solidifying them, which is essentially like an extrude, and then putting another subdivision on top. So essentially I'm making it thicker and then smoothing it, which is why you can see the main shape. And I've only got to create one face edge, and it builds everything with modifiers. I love modifiers. They are great. Now what I just did there was did a double G. You'll see it again there. I'm just basically sliding those points along the edge of the hull, so it keeps that flow again. Very important, the flow of the hull. And now I'm just faffing around with the inside because it's not quite right. I don't want it to be like a messy mess inside of there. Now, of course, the next thing is to start going into the next level of detail. And the best way to do that is to try and do it inside of the shape if you can. So often it's a good idea to adjust what you've got and then do duplicated surfaces. So I like doing dupe faces and then pulling them out and then putting them back in. So what I've done here, just for the point of proving that I can make this thing to myself really quickly and still in one shell, is I'm essentially building the door handle inside of the geometry. And again, it's a matter of a few bevels, a few cuts, pulling things around, straightening things up, pushing them back in. It's a great process. I honestly recommend everybody who does anything in 3D should at some point say, right, I'm going to build a car. I mean, it's fine. Or you can say, right, I'm going to build a spaceship. But the thing about building a car is it's got it's quite a distinct shape, and if it's not right, it will not feel right. If you get it, if you nail it, then you go, right, okay, I've gotten this right. And you won't get it right first time. No one gets a car right first time. But what you will find is that the more you do it, the happier you will become with the subject matter that you're creating, and you'll become more competent at it. And it's a great way of learning surface topology. If you are more sort of like character driven, I am not. I don't consider myself very good at building characters. It's an area that I've had done some work in, but I've never been completely satisfied with the results of the stuff that I've done. But if you like doing, hard ops, I mean, this is kind of this is the not the ultimate, but it is pretty much a benchmarking test that you can set yourself up with. Anyway, pretty much got the handle mostly right there. I think I ended up doing a bit more detailing, but I sort of went, okay, right, no, I'm happy with that. That's good. Yeah, actually, I think that is the piece that I'm happy with. And then I selected all of that, and then I duplicated it, and then I moved that one that I was happy with to where the other one is going to go, and then set it all up, and then thought, right, okay, now I need some more extra subdivisions. Now, this is the great thing about having split up that object into individual parts. It's still one object, but because it's in individual segments, it means that I can add in extra edge loops without adding any to the rest of the car. So that's what I've done there. I've gone in and I said, right, okay, I need to add some extra geometry here and here and here. So I've done those edge loops, added those polys, shifted the points by using the double G thing, so you get it to move across the edge, blown the polygons away, readjusted this so it matches up with the hole, and then I've gone in and merged the vertices. And it's almost but not quite perfect, because the moment the edge flow on that car, even with that hole, is pretty good. But the moment I select the two vertices and go, right, merge up to this edge, it tends to pull it a little bit out of shape. Right, here's this little panel on the side. I think I may have missed a little bit there. But what I did was a similar way to the way I created the door handles. I selected the polygons that were inside of the face, and then I just pulled them out, and then I did a solidify and a subdivide. And use those to basically build a patch on the side of the car. So it's a separate object, and then here we've also got another separate object again. This is obviously a rectangular kind of thing, which essentially is like a cover for the vent. Now I've only put one on one side of the car because I completely forgot to do it. There's a little bit of proportional editing there for me to pull things in and around to try and get them back inside the shape. There you go. And I did it up here as well. And I think, yeah, I started again. Yeah, basically, what I did was I was adjusting points and I wasn't adjusting the shape. So by doing that, I wasn't getting the right rotations that I wanted. So if I ended up rotating the shape first, then at least that way I can actually put it where I wanted it to go. So if you see, when I'm moving that, there you go, rotating all the verts there. But I rotated the actual thing in object mode, which meant that I actually got it, I could adjust it a lot more easily. Make it sit in the right place. So that was definitely a better process. But I again, as is the case with all these things, that's never going to be perfect, just purely because you can't adjust the shapes for an array. So I have to bake the array, and then once the array was baked, then it's a matter of going in and individually pulling around vertices. But here's the plus side: I already have, I've baked the array, but because I rotated the object, I can use the local axis of it rather than the global axis to manipulate those points so they go into the edge all hidden away, because they'll go in the right direction. You can see how the axes are at an angle, as is the object, rather than trying to faff, which is what I was doing before. I was faffing, king faff. And then obviously that's not quite right, so you basically start pulling in with the double G again, the points to make sure they get hidden underneath the surface. And then once they're in the way, you sort of kind of go into the car, blow away those faces, don't like them, don't want them, and now I've got the other shape which just sits on top. Nice and easy, it just fills the hole. So there you go, that's a shape there, and just pull those in a bit and then make it a bit more of a cavity. There we are, that's nice. I like that as well, it's all going well. So, at this point, you've got a lot of big detail, you've got some small detail, and obviously you've got the wing mirrors, which were, I think, I must have missed that bit out, that's okay. The wing mirror essentially was a matter of taking, again, using the loop tools, I took the excuse me, I took one of the pieces of the wing mirror and of the wing mirror panel and made those polygons circular, then extruded them out, pulled them round, rotated, extruded again, rotated the 45 degrees so they're looking back, 90 degrees, sorry, so they're looking back along the car, and then added some bevels in between just to make sure that they fitted properly. Yeah, so that's all good and fine and lovely. And now what I'm doing is I'm selecting the geometry, and I am, as much as possible, I am pulling these around. So now, at this point, this is basically me putting the hover thrustery things. I haven't really got a name for them. I'm not sure what I should want to call them. But I wanted to get something underneath the car, obviously, to make, because I wasn't bothering with wheels. I wanted to put something under there to make it look like, here's something that's going to make the car hover. Yeah. So I've just turned the car off and then turned the car back on. And you've noticed, by the way, there's probably some seats in there now. And that's because, yeah, seats. And what I'm doing now is I'm manipulating these and putting these in the right spots so that all I've got to do is very happily sit these inside of that bottom shell. And then once they're all in that bottom shell and in the right places in relation so they don't stick you out too far, they don't go in too far, then the point is to essentially manipulate the faces, the vertices that are in these shapes themselves on the surface, and then blow those away. So they're actually proper indents inside of the shape. Because I wanted them to be a formulaic shape, I had to start with a single shape. I couldn't just go into the shape. I mean, I could have just gone into the shape and just gone, right, okay, I'm going to blow these polygons away and then build a shape around the edges, or kind of force there to be a circular edge, and then done two circles and then sort of like work between the two. I wanted them to be straight shapes. I didn't want them to kind of like flow along. I wanted them to feel separate. So that's why I built them essentially by taking a cylinder, flopping it on its side, and then just basically pulling the vertices out down one edge. So then I'm extruding that back edge, we're extruding the front edge back in to the vehicle. And then this is the point where I was talking about, where I added a few edge loops, and just to make sure that everything sat properly in relation to the boxes, and then grabbed some verts, pulled them around so they all went just underneath those edges inside of the lips, and then did that on all of those, and then selected the polygons and just said, goodbye, Mr. Polygon. So I then had essentially what looked like indentations, but purposeful indentations into the car. I think that's probably about right there. I think. Come on, get it right, Gary. Oh, God, this bloke's taking forever with his sped up footage. Anyway, so I think there we go. Going to pop those in there, and then it's a bit like pick on the faces, and goodbye, Mr. Face. Goodbye, Mr. Face. There you go. So now we have essentially a dip in, but with a lip. So it kind of feels as though it's meant to be there. And obviously, look at that a bit. And then I needed something which would generate the power. So again, I take some sort of, I'll take a UV sphere, drop it into the place where I want to do, angle it around, and then once the angle is about right, stick an array modifier on there. This deletes the faces I don't need. Obviously, if you don't need faces, get rid of them. If you're not going to see them, there's no point there being there. So let's rotate that around, get it in the right spots. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. That's it. Come on. And then pop, and then duplicate that once I'm happy with the size and the positioning, and pop it into the other ones. It's all, I mean, there's nothing really here that's complicated. That's the thing. It's and with everything in terms of modeling, it's always about knowing process, understanding process. Starting off with a base shape, building it in one big broad stroke to get the surface flow, and then adding more detail, and then looking at what you've done there, and then adding finer detail. It's I say it's a fundamental thing. I mean, Gleb Alexandrov talks about it in his, whenever he talks about his hard op stuff, he talks about it, and he's absolutely right. In fact, anybody who says anything otherwise really needs to think a bit more about what they're doing, because everything is about broad strokes, then smaller strokes, and then even smaller strokes. Otherwise you won't get scale. So that's why I'm adding some little bits here, some little dinks, just so it feels like there's a little bit of extra stuff on the bottom there. And then of course we needed something on the front. So I've basically gone in and said, right, okay, well let's say that's my grill. But obviously I actually don't want the shape that's there. So I then go into that grill object that I will separate from that one. There you go, it's now a separate object. And let's go into the shape and then straighten the vertices. So straighten, 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 basically. G stretch, and occasionally a bit of relax, and then blow those ones away. And then you can see I've got that sort of like, I've got that deep shape. There we go. And then just pull that around. Obviously the mirror tool means I'm only going to work on one side. Whatever I do on one side, I get on the other side. It's very, very handy, very nice. And then I've kind of created something that feels a bit more like a grill. Really, I mean, the side grill thing, we just never wasn't going to. I don't think it was going to work. And in the end, I'm quite glad that I didn't do it. But having it on the front is definitely at some level of necessity there. Let's have a look. Where am I going? That's right. Pushing that bit out, make it a bit more, so it feels a bit roundy. There's already a modifier. No, there's not a modifier on that. That's actually a separate cube. So let's get that in place. And then again, the array modifier, just shift it upwards, get in the right spot, and then adjust it for position and get it in. And then once that's kind of right and in, then apply the array. And then once you've applied the array again, of course, you've then got to go in and adjust the actual elements. Now, this isn't auto mirror. This is just a box which is basically built and adjusted and then turned into array. So this is, you know, this adjustment I'm doing over here, that's across the board because I'm doing it down the side. But I will have to go in and on the front end up moving the points that are on the front on the other side because obviously they're sticking out. There you go, let's sort out that bit, push those back in, and back in. And let's go back to the front and have a little look and go, right, well, let's push those back in. And having two windows, not doing a quad view. If you do a quad view, which is great, you press Alt, Control, and Q at the same time, you kind of get that sort of like 4-view layout that you're used to in any other software. So you've got the top view, the front view, the side view, and your orthographic view. Your perspective view. But when you have that, you end up with, if you want one of those windows to be transparent, so you can see through and pull things around properly, you know, if you want one in wireframe and you want one in solid frame, and want one in solid or textured, you can't because they're intrinsically the same view still. It's not actually 4 views at all. Whereas if you split the window and add yourself another view in, you can have one of those views as solid, another one as wireframe. So that's sometimes a better way of doing things. Obviously, it's nicer to work in solid because when you're working in a solid view or a texture view, you get a better idea of what you're doing. I am now. What am I doing? Oh, that's right. Yes. And now this is a bit of door detailing. So again, that's, you know, taking a section of the door, duplicating it out, adding some more edge loops just to give it a bit more form on the edges, and then doing the same on the door further back. Again, the same sort of thing, just giving it a bit of extra detail. Actually, looking at that now, I should have taken that all the way up to the other door, so it felt more like one piece, but again with the gap, because the gap also makes the difference. A little bit more detail here. Let's just add some bevel in and extrude that out, push it out a bit. There we go, edging in. There we are, lovely. Nice little bit of extra detail. Looking at it with cavity on so you can see how it looks. That's all kind of going okay. And then finally, just, you know, putting everything in both sides. So I'm selecting objects which haven't been mirrored. There's little holes, and then mirroring them using the actual car itself as the mirror guide. So the mirror object, because that's all set to 0. Going in, I've put the windshield, I've pushed that in a little bit. Just adding a bit more detail now, basically stuff to go kind of inside the car. So I'm taking the glass and I'm changing its display just to wireframe for the time being. It doesn't change it very much in its purpose. It just makes it wireframe. but that's just the viewport display. So you can have set an object to be wireframe in the display, in the solid display. So you can, so essentially you're making it, treating it like it's a window. So you can see how it would work as a window when you come to the final thing. Here I am just putting up a bit of rooftop head up. In fact, you do see them in cars a lot, these little bits that stick down. They're normally because they're sensor arrays for like rain, if you've got automatic windscreen wipers and stuff. But it's just a nice little detail that sort of like passes on the feel that it's actually a real thing. It's not just a fake piece of plastic. It's got a purpose. It's probably got switches on or little dials or air conditioning panels or something. But it's there. It's something that just feels like it should be. It's a purposeful thing. Obviously, you can see my rough seats that I dropped in. We'll give more detail to those in a while. And then once I've done this, putting in a box and dropping in and building a dashboard. And again, just taking a look at it and going, right, I need something in there. I need some sort of box shape of some kind. So adding in a box, literally adding in a cube, auto mirroring it, pulling things around a little bit, and then pushing it outwards on one side, so extruding a bit, and then edge looping and extruding again, and edge looping and extruding again, just so it's got some sort of like, this is where stuff will go inside of the car. I mean, in all honesty, it probably wouldn't be anything like that. It would probably be very much a flat thing with gaps underneath. Now there I'm increasing the subdivision to flatten off the front and pulling out some, pushing and pulling around as one does, extruding a bit more, pushing and pulling around, just continually trying to create something which feels realistic, something that feels like it's there. It's again, it's one of those detaily things I mentioned before. If you don't have it, you're like, where is it? But it doesn't have to be amazing. It just has to be a level of detail that is there. I mean, really, if I'm thinking about it now, I would have liked to have added some more polygons into that and put an air vent at the front, so it looks like it's got a way of pushing air up onto the windscreen, which of course you would have. Reality in unreality, if that's not the word at all. Trying to make things that aren't real have an element of reality. It's back to that thing about making a car. It has to look like a car, even if it's not a car, so that it feels like it's a car. When is a car not a car? When it's a door. No, that's not right. Oh dear. Anyway, very quick surface for this to sit underneath, and again, that's a matter of taking I could have just taken a cylinder, but I tend to like quads. I don't like triangles in the middle, obviously, so I take a grid. I then select all the faces and go circle, and that circles all the outer ones. I then select the next set of what would be edges, I suppose, inside of that square, and make those circular. At the moment, right now, I'm deleting all of the materials. There's a better way of deleting them. I think I actually will do it very shortly, but basically you change it to scene file up at the top in the outliner, and then you can pick your materials. You can actually delete your materials from there. It's a lot better way of doing it, a lot more refined way of doing it. And here I'm doing my first auto detailing. So I'm creating a color ramp with the Fresnel, which is going into the base color. And because of the way that the principal shader works, it's relatively similar to a car shader anyway, because it has a standard metal. It's got the roughness, which makes it more metallic, because it makes it shinier, and then it's got the clear coat, and the clear coat is like that extra veneer layer on the top of a car, that gives you that extra layer of really strong reflection. So you can have a semi-matte finish actually on the metal, but then you have the clear coat which really pulls it out. So you can see that there, the clear coat is like another layer of shine over the top. I'm now taking all the door jambs and all the extra bits and saying, right, I need them slightly plasticky. So I'm doing that and adding new materials as I'm going along. So again, those are normally plastic. I'm just editing the UVs. It's nice to have them so the texture follows the shape. So what I'm going to do is go into text tools, which I believe, I'm not entirely sure, it's either a free add-on or it's inside of Blender. But what you can do there is you can hit the button called rectify, and that takes the shape that you've got in there and forces all the points to be rectangular, so it puts them in the right places. And at this point I am now messing around with things, and I realise I haven't actually plugged the UVs in. So there's the UVs, and now those shapes are, those dots are following the actual physical shape of the object. We're almost there pretty much now. We're just on the shade. Those are actually a Voronoi texture that is being adjusted. I've rotated it 45 degrees, so it's a bit more triangular, and then I'm throwing that into a color ramp, and I'm also putting it into a bump. So we're getting a bit more shape and sheen from that, because that extra detail just makes it kind of pop a bit more. So the next thing to do is the floor, the door decorations, and so on. Now, I've talked about it before in shading, in that you can have more than one shader on an object, and then you can assign a different material that you've got on your object to other parts. So in this instance, I've got slot 1 and I've got slot 2. So in slot 2, I've plugged in the chrome that I created for that tiny little door button, and I'm assigning that to my door handle. If I change anything in slot 2, if I change the shader in slot 2, anything that's got that shader, like the chrome, will get a different shader. So just be wary of that when you're assigning it in the material editing part. So again, here I'm applying chrome to those elements as well. So it's another chrome handle that's exactly the same as the front one. I'm now adjusting the glass. Obviously, the object shader, you've got to make it opaque if you want to see it in Eevee as transparent. And then also you could do the same with the shadow, make that transparent as well. I've actually made that panel at the back transparent, and in the final, at the end of the day, I changed it to kind of like a deep goldy red. I wanted another panel color, so it didn't feel like it was just one color on the car. I don't know why, because when you actually have a car, unless you've had loads of bits replaced, they're all the same color. It just felt right to do something a bit different. That bit was, I think I must have missed a few points in here. I think I did. I don't know why though. I think I must have missed something on the video. I probably hit pause at the wrong point. These things happen. But fundamentally what you're seeing there is the bits that I made circular and pulled out, which were inside of the window. I took the window panel, extruded it inwards. I then took some of those faces and I made them round, and then I pushed them in and pulled them out, extruded them out, added some edge loops, and essentially tried to make myself some car lights, which it kind of worked, but obviously for some reason they rotated themselves, which I wasn't intending them to do. So I've just been fixing those and putting those right. And now we're getting there, we're getting somewhere with the car now, starting to feel a bit more like it's a metal car, which is nice. And going through the motions of just going through what's left and shading those things up. Sometimes I'm using the same shaders that I've got, other times I'm not. The problem you've got there, I've actually got there, is there's holes in the geometry which don't exist because they're in the internal geometry for the inside of the car. I haven't blown those faces away. And then again, I want to add a little extra detail onto the bonnet. So rather than colour it, which I should have done really, I ended up just scaling things down and pushing them in. So it's almost but not quite a modelling detail, as in terms of, hey, model such and such car. And then obviously I wanted these to be lit, so when it created a principal shader, I just went in and blew the principal side away, put an emission in there, plugged it in, and then applied it to all of those. So, and then here again, what I did was I selected Chrome, and then I created a new shader which put in slot 2, which I edited and assigned it. You can't see that because I haven't done it quite yet. I then assigned it inside of the edit mode, and then messed around with it a little bit so it felt like it was an indicator. A little bit of glass on the side there. And again, same with the chairs. I wanted something that felt a little bit leatherette, but not leather, kind of faux leather, I would say feather. And then looked at the chair seats and decided I didn't like them, so I wanted to do some more work on those. But again, it's just, that's what it is with modelling most of the time. It's saying, okay, this doesn't feel right. It feels too cheap. It doesn't feel like it's a car seat. So just out of corner here on this, because I'm using only an HD element of edge of my screen, I have got a little window and I'm looking at a car seat, just so you know. By the way, when the car vanishes, what I'm doing is I'm actually, because I'm using collections in the outliner, I'm turning off their visibility in the collection. Just what collections are fantastic. They're really good for when it comes to using render layers, which at some point I will go through, because render layers sound like a nightmare in Blender, and in fact they are a doddle. It's something which is, you know, vastly underused. I honestly do believe, for making work correct. I mean, it's all well and good rendering something out, but sometimes you need an element on its own, and a cryptomatte sounds fine, but it doesn't always necessarily give you the result that you'd like. The edges can be a bit off, whereas if you can just go in there and say, right, well, I want this to be a holdout object, anything in this collection I want to create a hole, you can do that, and that's wonderful. What I'm doing here, by the way, is I'm adding a noise to the dash material, which is kind of like a grey dash. That's a Musgrave, and I'm adjusting it to give it that kind of like false kind of like bump feel. There's like, not false bump, there's a very small fine bump that you get on car dashes, and again it just helps to just add that tiny little bit of reality to the whole thing. Not, you know, it doesn't require a huge amount, just a little bit. So, you know, here we are, just again adding more detail, bit of color here, bit of color there. It's you know, it's all good. It's all good in Hood. And this is now me making a new shader for a side panel. I think it's that shaded 2. No, that's me adjusting the colors I've already got on that shader. Yeah, that's just me changing those, and then bringing the floor up. And I think, is that where now the panel's still, yeah, it's still transparent. But it's a pretty good point that you look at it and you go, yeah, that looks like a car, as long as you're happy with it. And that was, yeah, that's me not making elements invisible in the render, but in the collection, what I've done is I haven't actually had all the buttons available and visible. So what it's done is it's rendering an object which I've turned off in the viewport but not turned off in the renderer. Sorting out some of the collections as well, getting all the elements that are inside the car, so I can then have complete control over what's in there, and deleting anything that I don't actually need. Essentially, it's what is it? Making house, keeping house, something house, housey house, cleaning house. Must be cleaning house. Got to be, hasn't it? That is, thank you, Texture Haven. That is Canary Wharf, a 4K Canary Wharf image from Texture Haven. Absolutely fantastic, guys. They really do save you bacon. And again, totally free. Please make donations to these guys. They are worth every penny, these HDRIs that they've got. They're all fantastic, you know. So please make a donation. And then here is a first render just to see how it looks, and it's not looking too bad. But then I notice some of the paneling is, I could do with some more plasticky paneling on the bottom of the doors, because plasticky panels on the bottom of doors look like they're easier to clean. That's me adjusting the environment, having a proper look around it. So yeah, that's what I decided. That was the point where I decided I needed some plasticky bits. So I created a duplicate of the shader that was on it, and then basically blew all the parts away that made it what it was. Added some texture in, and again, thanks for UV mapping. I've got it quite nice. Changed the color, and I've gone for a complementary color to the orange, which is a blue. Added a little bit of detail with another Voronoi, just enough to give it some sort of interest, and then applied that to that one, and then applied it to that one, and then gone, right, okay, I think we need to make a dupe of this. So I've duplicated that shader, and then applied that to those ones. And then, did I apply it to the back as well? I definitely applied it to the back at some point. Maybe not here, maybe a little bit later. But here you go. Here is the final render of the car, which that was just about 3 hours and 20, I think, altogether. But you know, I'll be honest with you. Here I am doing other bits now, but I'm quite happy with that. I'm quite happy with the car. It looks, just adjusting the glass, aren't I? That's it, making it feel more like glass. There you go. For a speed build, And I don't just mean the fact that I sped it up 500 times faster than it is. Starting from nothing and ending with something 3 and a bit hours later, I'm actually not unhappy with that. It's not a bad build. It feels like a vehicle. Everything is in the right place. I would like to spend more time on the front lights. I'm actually quite happy with the shape. Possibly those door handles now look like they should be on the same height. But then I've got to decide which one is the one that's too low or too high. So there it is. There you go. I put that colour on the back panel in the end. But there's a little spinny round of the car. It's not too bad. It's I've done worse. Anyway, look, this is again, it's just me doing something based on a drawing that I drew. Please, I hope you've taken something from this, but please, if you've liked this or you think anyone might watch it, please share it around. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm releasing one of these pretty much every single week. This one was slightly delayed due to one thing or another. I'll be honest, one of the reasons is because I actually lost a load of work and had to then try and get it back. Getting it back didn't work, so I had to do this whole thing all over again. These things happen. So we live with these and we just face. You've just got to go, right, rise above it, crack on, Gary. Before my throat gives out, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to watch this. Please subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram. You can contact me on my website, which is genvfx.com, and that's gen-vfx.com. And leave a comment there. If there's something you want me to build or there's something you want me to show you how to do, just drop me a line. Really appreciate it. And yeah, listen, thanks so much. And hopefully see you on the next one. Take care now. Bye.